Good evening, you all. My name is Demarcus Johnson, and I am before you today because, as we all know, that we have a problem with police brutality. However, with police brutality, a lot of people tend to get in an uprage and complain about the police brutality, but yet no one's really giving solutions as to how we could possibly fix this problem. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually give you some solutions to what could possibly fix this so that we can have a better law enforcement system. So, police brutality, when it comes to police, they have a civic duty to protect and serve individuals. But like most people who hold a great deal of authority, their powers are sometimes abused and a little too much so these most recent years. And for anyone who doesn't really know what police brutality is when a person who did nothing wrong and displayed no imminent threat, but they're still victimized and abused by the police. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some solutions that could possibly cut down on police brutality. Now, considering that I'm in the military and I know the training for military police, I would only assume that law enforcement training, if not on the same level, but is a bit more extensive and intense. Now, my reason saying that is because when we look at police brutality these days, it's almost like they instantly go to using deadly force on a civilian, which is not good. And when it comes to deadly force, I really believe that the law enforcement should be trained differently. So that's the first solution: is their training procedures and their police procedures should be different because when it comes to deadly force, according to the United States Armed Forces, deadly force is force that a person uses causing or that a person knows or should know will create a substantial risk of causing death or serious bodily harm or injury. Now, in most jurisdictions, this force is justified only under conditions of extreme necessity as a last resort, or when all lesser means have failed or cannot reasonably be employed. Now, what that is saying is you can't use deadly force unless you try to get the person down or try to take the person out with any other forces before that. Now, when it comes to law enforcement as it relates to deadly force, you know, law enforcement should consider using the military approach, I'll say, because on the law side, at one point, deadly force was okay to use whenever. However, common law allowed officers to use any force necessary to effect a felony's arrest. But it was later narrowed down with the Tennessee versus Garner ruling in 1985 when the U.S. Supreme Court said that deadly force may not be used unless necessary to prevent the escape of and an officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses significant threat or serious bodily injury to the officer or others. Now, considering that was changed and that it said, deadly force could be used if there was probable cause, that brings us to the next problem. So, and which relies under, the training and procedure need to be trained differently because now the question is, are they really being trained and taught what probable cause really is? Because somewhere along the line something's got twisted or they're not really understanding what deadly force is or not understanding what probable cause is because probable cause is the standard by which police authorities have a reason to obtain a warrant for the arrest of a suspected criminal, and the standard also applies to personal and property searches. Now, however, probable cause in the conjunction with the preponderance of evidence also refers to the standard by which the grand jury believes that a crime has been committed. The term also comes from the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So that brings us back to the training situation. Um, it's like training has to be different. It needs to be different because if you are unarmed, whether you are running or whether you are resisting arrest, deadly force should not be used. And that's why, the police is trained to use other detaining devices such as the baton, they have their strikes that they do on the person, or they have a stun gun. There's no way you should shoot a person with a 9 millimeter 5 times because they were running. And okay, let's just use this for an example. Say there is a 14-year-old mentally challenged child. If someone calls and that child is wandering around, someone calls because they look suspicious. If a police approach that child and the child being at a out of the ordinary mental state begins to run. That police can then say, "Oh, I had probable cause," and shoot them. That is not probable cause. You did not have a probable cause. You did not have a search. You did not have a warrant for that person. You did not really believe that they were a criminal. So no, that's not going to fly. So yes, training definitely has to be taught differently. And like I said, maybe they should take the military approach. Now, secondly, another solution that could possibly take place is all officers should be forced to wear body cams, whether the body cam is on the long as the body cam is on the person, whether it's on the uniform, on the cover or the hat, or you know, just being in the car doesn't really work these days. People run away from the car. They some in some police brutality cases they have veered the suspect or the victim away from the car. So when you have a body cam, this covers everything that takes place within that routine traffic stop, or whether it's a domestic arrest or whatever the arrest is, or whatever the conflict with the police and the civilian is. Now, with body cams, there will be no room for cover ups. No cover ups in conjunction with lying on a victim who cannot lawfully defend themselves because they're dead or hospitalized, or they're simply their word against law enforcement. Now, with a body cam, this actually opens room for the jury to see what actually really happened, and police could be prosecuted and charged, like just like in the Oscar Grant case or the Walter Scott case. You have proof, you have live footage of whether or not there was some type of misconduct that actually had taken place. So yes, with these body cams, it actually give the ability to for everyone to actually take apart and see what really happened versus the police saying this, or the civilian, even civilian sides. Sometimes civilians lie too, but with that cam there's no room for lying. There's no room for foul play or anything to be taken twisted and turned. So yes, body cams at all times on a regular routine traffic stop or whatever. Like the moment they clock in, or the moment that clock starts, or when they get on duty, that body cam needs to start. So we'll be able to take that, and we'll be able to use that for evidence. Lastly, I would say another great solution would be heavily reprimanded officers, or actually removed from the actual police force, removed from duty, versus not having any police at all. Because, whether we believe it or not, and whether we want to accept it or not all cops are bad cops. There are some good cops in the force, and probably more good cops make up the force than bad cops does. But these bad cops does things so bad that when it's bad, it's really bad. And so when they do something that's out of the norm, or something bad, or something that's unjust, or something that's unethical, I don't think suspension should be a part of that. They should not be suspended and then allowed back to the force. There should not also be an opportunity for them to receive a desk job. That's not cool. No desk job should be available. And then no unions to protect the bad, because you have a cop who served 30 years, right? That for the first 15 years of that term, they were a really great cop, but the last 15 years they did some really bad things. But then you have the union who come and protect them because they did good those 15 years, but those last 15 years were really bad. So yes, the union should not be able to protect those bad cops. And then some people say, well, maybe we should do away with law enforcement then. Then no, because then we would have a lot of third world countries, no law enforcement. And if we had no law enforcement and living in a third world country, the murder and crime rate would constantly go up. Let's just take, for example, the boycott in Baltimore, Maryland, with the Freddie Gray case, when the cops killed Freddie Gray, and they were on trial to be charged with that or whatever, and for 30 days the Baltimore Police Department boycotted. And within those 30 days, there were 50 murder cases. Within 30 days. That is the most it has been in the last 50 years in Baltimore. However, however, that was very unjust, as well as considering after a quiet and long investigation, the Department of Justice found reasonable cause to believe that the Baltimore Police Department engages in a pattern of practices and conducts that violates the Fourth Amendment of the First and Fourth Amendments of the Constitution, as well as federal anti-discrimination laws and racism against blacks, because a lot of people get started with, well, the Black Lives Matter movement, that's why cops do this. No, that should not be a reason to do what you do. The Black Lives Matter movement started because of what had taken place, because of it seemed like cops were getting away with killing a lot of black individuals. And when the Baltimore Police Department was found unjust in that area, it opened the eyes of a lot of civilians. It opened the eyes of a lot of people. So, granted, the movement can be done a little different. You got people on the movement who are very radical and zealous, which I'm not, saying that it was okay, because sometimes they get out of hand. But all in all, no system is going to be perfect. All of these solutions does take effect, if all these solutions does take effect, there's still going to be someone who messes up, especially in a justice system that is so flawed. However, whoever is in the right, when the law is against you, fight with facts. And when the facts are against you, fight with the law. But if we have different procedures and policies and training that take place, and actual body cams, and getting rid of the bad ones, picking the bad C's out, the law enforcement and the police force should be a very great thing. It should be good for people to deal with. So, I really want to thank you all for listening. And just for a few fun facts, police brutality started way before these past few years. Let's just take a look back at Rodney King. That is the greatest example of police brutality. Look at Katherine Johnston, the 92-year-old woman who was involved in police brutality because they raided her house and she didn't know who it was coming in. And there's a lot more people if you just look up police brutality top cases. And granted, unfortunately a lot of those cases happen to be with black African Americans. So that's where the Black Lives Matter movement come in. I'm not downplaying any other move. I'm not downplaying any other race or anything like that. But police brutality just absolutely has to stop, and it has to stop by us voicing what needs to be done. And with these solutions I have given, hopefully those things can be done, and we can get a change in our law enforcement system. Thank you for listening.